Hey guys, how's it going? I'm here with Chris Mate of Overwater Bases. We're back for another month of This Month with Chris, or whatever we decide to call these. But we're back again anyway, and today we're going to be talking about bridges and intonation, because it's something I get asked a lot about by students. How to adjust bridges and all the kind of, the different kind of bridges that you can get. So yeah, Chris, what do you want to tell us?
Right, well, I mean, obviously the bridge is a fundamental part of the instrument, and electric guitars and basses have traditionally always had much more adjustable bridges than you get on acoustic instruments. And this is partly because the access that we have on modern instruments, modern fretted instruments, is much farther up the neck.
Okay. Yeah.
And so therefore the closer the intervals become, the more critical the intonation becomes.
Yeah.
Also with traditional instruments, double basses, cellos, violins and things like that, although obviously something like a violin is a very short scale instrument, so you do have to be very accurate. Nevertheless, the intonation of the actual instrument can be compromised, or you can compromise, or not compromise, that's the wrong word, compensate.
Yeah, you can compensate.
For the intonation of the instrument by your fingering. And I mean, in a double bass, which has got a 40-inch scale length, at this end, you could be 1/8 of an inch out, and I'm probably better not say this in front of Jeff or somebody, but you could be 1/8 of an inch out and nobody noticed. Yeah. But high up, it becomes ever more critical.
Yeah.
So, as I say, with fretted instruments, where there is no compensation, you can't move around a bit and pull the string into tune quite as easily. That's where we get into using compensated bridges or compensating saddles.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, the first electric basses, Fenders and things, would have relatively simple bridges. I mean, something like this. I mean, this is very close to a Fender bridge. It's not a Fender bridge, but it's that same sort of idea.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a chunky bit of bent metal with movable saddles on it, which you can adjust for height and for length.
I was going to say there's two real adjustments on the bridge, isn't there?
Yeah.
If you look at even like yours, these ones, there's generally two main adjustments.
Yeah.
The length and then the height as well.
Yeah. So the length is about intonation, and the height is obviously about action, about how high the strings are off the fingerboard.
And generally, is the height altered? Is it the same kind of alteration on each type of bridge? Like for something like a more modern style?
Yeah, I mean, most bridges come in all sorts of different forms. I mean, it's partly why I brought these along as well. I mean, these are individual bridge pieces. This is the sort of thing that you have on your narrow string spacing.
Yeah, Ibanez have used them as well.
Yeah, I mean, it means that you can have them any space apart. So if you have a super wide string spacing, you can set them farther apart. If you want a super narrow, I mean, with these actual pieces, which we have made for our instruments, the minimum is 16 millimeters apart.
If you put them all right,
if they're right close together. Yeah. I mean, some of your instruments are 16.5, and you can do, obviously any space up from there. And also, they allow you to string through the body. And sometimes we can talk about that a little bit in a minute, because that there's different opinions on whether it works and what the point of it is. But in my opinion, I think it is useful on shorter scale instruments. Okay. It seems to add a little bit more dynamics to the tonality, and I've
got on my 33-inch scale, it's through body, obviously.
Exactly. Yeah.
So that's the height adjusters. And before everybody starts adjusting, is there anything people need to take into consideration when they are adjusting the height of their strings?
Only if it depends on the type of saddle. With this type of bridge, not a lot. As long as, apart from making sure you use the right size of Allen wrench or Allen key.
Yeah.
And they usually are those grub screws, although on some older
don't use the wrong ones because it rounds it off and then it's a complete pain.
If you once you've chewed that up, they're quite difficult to get out apart from anything else, and you certainly can't adjust them. Some of the older bridges of this type, instead of having an Allen screw in there, have a little crosshead screw, which you use a small jeweler's screwdriver on. But again, you want to make sure it's the right one, and with those, you've got to be a bit careful. If there's too much tension on the string, you could end up either breaking the screwdriver or chewing up the head. So just be a little bit careful when you're winding them up and down under tension. But I'm not saying don't do it under tension.
And obviously it does alter the height of the string, but before everybody just dives in and starts altering the heights of the strings and things like that, you need to take into consideration sort of like, you know, your neck, you know, whether it's bowed or straight.
Yeah,
things like that we won't talk about today.
That's another.
It's a different conversation.
A different conversation, and it's to do with the overall setup. What we're talking about here more is the way that bridges affect the instrument and what intonation is all about. So I mean, there are various prerequisites, shall we say, for bridges. One is the fact that you can move the saddles up and down, and also the fact that you can move the saddles in lengthways.
Yeah. So for people that don't understand, because I can remember when I first started playing, and I didn't understand why these weren't all, you know, set
in
straight.
a straight line.
Yeah. Why they're all.
Well, I mean, on a classical guitar, they are.
Yeah.
But it's to do with the string itself, the makeup of the string, and the diameter of the string, and also to some degree, it's about the height of the string off the frets. Right, for instance, if you set the intonation with the action very high, you would find that it would be different if you lowered the action.
Yeah, it's going to...
In the same way as if you change the gauge of the string. So if you move from one manufacturer of string or one brand of string to another brand of string, then you'll find that you will have to reset the intonation. I mean, ideally, you should really check the intonation every time you change the strings, because there will be very small differences.
Yeah. So for people that don't know what intonation is, what is in layman's terms,
intonation,
what does it even mean?
The intonation is... Basically, it's the fact of the string being in tune with itself,
isn't it?
Over its entire length.
So you play an F down, say, on the E string, first fret, F there, and you play it up here, and they will be in tune with each other.
Yeah, and particularly on the same string. So if you play an octave note on the instrument there and then down here, then that... Although it's an octave apart, it wants to be in tune with itself.
And if it's not in tune, that means your intonation's out. So if you've ever played up high on your instrument, on your bass, and it sounds odd up above the 12th fret, but fine down in the first 5 frets, then your intonation's out.
Yeah, and the other time that you will very much notice it, in the same way is if the guitar is out of tune with itself. So, I mean, from a tuning point of view, is if it's out of tune with itself from an intonation point of view. If you start to play chords, and particularly chords high up. I mean, anybody who's tried to play chords on a fretless will immediately understand the importance of intonation, because if your fingers are just fractionally in the wrong place, then it just sounds completely out of tune. So that's the reason for doing it, is so that the instrument is in tune. And one of the things that I do when I've set the intonation on an instrument, I mean, I generally use a tuner to get it into the ballpark, or get it as close as I can, but I always check it with my ears. And one of the things I do is to play octaves. And also to play chords higher up the neck with open strings in them. If you do that, you can hear the open string ringing, whether it's in tune with the fretted strings,
note,
farther up the neck. And that's quite and it's even on guitars rather than basses, it's even more critical, and it's one of those real tests.
Yeah.
You know, if you play a chord halfway up the fingerboard that's all still got some open strings in it,
then it still needs to be in tune, obviously.
Yeah.
And if it's not, the intonation's out.
Yeah. So it's one of those test things.
Yeah.
Of doing it.
And it's absolutely nothing to be scared of either. Like intonation, I get a lot of students saying, "Oh, my intonation's out," and they're quite scared about. You know, it's actually really easy to do. Like, I'll tell you how I do it, and then you can tell me if you would do it any differently.
Yeah.
I just play the open string, and then I fret it at the 12th fret through a tuner, and then make sure that the open string is in tune with the 12th fret. That's how I do it.
Yeah, well, I mean, essentially, yes. I mean, as I say, is
and then if it isn't, should I say, I alter I move the saddle back and forward until it is in tune with itself. But only a few millimeters here.
Well, I mean, essentially, what there's kind of a rule of thumb with it. With a bass, the scale length of the instrument, the length of the string from the front of the nut to the front of the saddle is the nominal scale length. And the frets are worked out on that basis. So if somebody says, I've got a 34-inch scale neck, that means that the nominal length between there and there is 34 inches. And the frets have been worked out in sequence to make in a graduated way in order that each note is in tune within that scale length. So if the bridge is in completely the wrong place, but all the frets are in the right place, it's never going to play in tune ever.
Yeah.
You know, but what we find
I've had a bass before where the bridge was in the wrong place.
Well, we've got an interesting test bass in the workshop. I remember we put a picture of it up on Facebook once, and it's like a square board with a neck sticking out. And it's actually for trying pickup positions. And the neck bears no relation to the intonation, because you can actually move it back and it will go anything from 32 to 36 inch scale length. But of course, if it was a fretted neck. Anyway, I think it's a 34 inch fretted neck. But in terms of the rule of thumb, the G string generally wants to be pretty much bang on the scale length, whatever that scale length is. And I mean, we can talk about scale length a little bit if we have time, or maybe we'll talk about that.
Yeah, we'll talk about that another time. We could do a whole new thing on that. So the what you find is, if this is actually a 35-inch scale, 5-string, and the G string is just a fraction, maybe, I don't know, half a millimeter or less behind the scale length. And then with each successive string, the strings on here are fairly evenly spaced. So you've got on here, it's the equivalent of 40, 60, 80, 100 thousandths of inch. So 0.040 to 0.100. And then the B string, which I think is a 128 on this, so it's 128 thou, which is a bigger jump, a slightly bigger jump. You've got a 28 thou jump rather than a 20 thou jump. So that one, you notice, is a little bit farther back again. They're all kind of...
So it's related to the diameter of the string. I mean, there are technical, scientific, physics reasons why we do this, but from a point of view of simplicity, it's about the triangulation of the string over the fingerboard, if you see what I mean, and the diameter of the fingerboard and the way that the string resonates. So generally, and although when you're used to doing it with a specific scale length and the specific brand of strings, you can pretty well guess. I mean, when I string a bass up for the first time, I will roughly set the intonation to where I think it's going to be, and generally it's not far out.
And then you tweak after that.
And then you tweak it after that. I mean, obviously with a fretless, you have to guess. You know, you have to measure it. You can't because you don't have a precise point.
So you've got to do the thing with the G string and then move it down.
And then just move everything else into where you think it's going to be.
And then start testing with the tune.
Yeah, and I mean, you could obviously relate it to a fretted bass of the same scale length, and that will give you a pretty good idea. But the fretless player, of course, can compensate, as we said. So the thing that Scott said, which is playing the open note and then fretting the 12th fret, which will give you the octave. You can also play
a
harmonic, which will give you pitch-wise something closer to the fretted note. Oh, wrong one. So, yeah, generally the 12th fret is somewhere around the top horn. That's about balance. So, as I say, it's nothing to worry about. But what you must remember is to do it in the right sequence when you are doing a setup. So the string heights want to be at the height. You know, you've set the truss rod, you've adjusted the nut height and all that stuff. And the string height over the fretboard wants to be what you are comfortable with when you're playing before you set the intonation. Because if you set the intonation first and then dramatically change the string height, then the intonation won't be quite
Intonation is last in line, right?
Yeah, exactly.
If you're an Academy member, you'll probably have seen the course that Chris has got in the Academy where he talks about, you know, setting up basses.
It's in a lot more detail.
It's in a lot more detail, and he actually talks you through the specific, which audience, but the whole order.
Yeah, there's 5 points.
5 points in the setup. So if you are an Academy member, make sure you go check that out. And if you aren't an Academy member, what are you waiting for? Get on it. Join. But so it is the last in line. And something I always do as well is when I've set my intonation, like this with the neck rest, although I normally use a toilet roll, there you go. I normally then pick it up and do it again.
Yes, exactly. Because in the playing position, it's going the neck isn't, when you have it like that, there's a natural thing to let that there will be a little bit more curve in it because the weight of the instrument itself. So when you do the final check and when you're playing it to check and playing your octaves and that sort of thing and playing the harmonics, I mean, sort of basically play the harmonic and down, do it in the playing position because that's how it's going to be.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
intonation, guys, it's something that as a bass player and a guitar player, if you're watching this, you have to be able to do this. It's not something that you've got any choice about doing. You need to be able to do it because, as Chris said, every time you change your strings, you should be checking your intonation, and it is something that I'm always, you know, messing with obviously changing my strings, but I would say every quarter or something like that, every 3 months or something like that, I'll play something and it'll have gone slightly out, you know. I think they just move naturally.
Well, actually, what you find is it's something, when you set the intonation, you should always do it with new strings.
Yeah,
and I think strings and anchoring of strings is just something else that I would just mention before we wrap up.
Yeah.
The anchoring of the string, where the ball end of the string is fixed to the bridge. I mean, here we have a bridge in its raw state. And you see that the string is anchored there. I mean, on this type of bridge, the string is anchored through the hole in the bottom. And you need a certain amount of angle, and it's called the string break angle, over the saddle, so that saddle can't move, and it's got good downward pressure, and you'll get a much more even, much clearer note like that.
If there's not enough break angle over the nut like this, if it's too shallow, the string will start buzzing like hell.
Yeah, and it won't sound pure.
Yeah.
You'll lose the purity. The construction, we've talked about the diameter of the string affecting the position that the saddle wants to be in.
Yeah.
But it's not just the overall diameter. So therefore, you know, because this string here, the G string, is one wrap and one core.
Yeah.
So you basically got the core size, which is a certain diameter, and then the rest of that gauge is made up by the wire that's wrapped around the outside of it. As you get through the strings, you have more than one
cores,
wrap.
Isn't it? Is it more wraps?
No, more
cores?
wraps. Well, you
more
can
wraps.
have multi-core.
Right, okay.
There are strings, and there are also, I mean, this is getting into strings now, but you can have round cores, or you can have octagonal cores. The machine wound cores, this is something I learned from our string maker actually, is that the reason why a round core will give you a more flexible string and a slightly purer tone, But a lot of string manufacturers, almost all string manufacturers, mostly use a hexagon core.
Right, okay.
And the reason for that is that when the machine winding, the outer wrap grips to it better.
Right, okay, yeah.
But as I say, if you have a different combination of wrap and core, that will affect the intonation even though the outer diameter is the same. So
Really?
that's just something to remember.
So if you're changing strings and stuff like maybe different brands or different...
Absolutely. If you go from one brand to another, but they're exactly the same gauge, you definitely need to check the intonation. And always check intonation with new strings, not used strings, because as used strings get dents and things in them, the intonation starts to wander.
Yeah. And that's it for today, guys. Thank you again for listening. Hopefully you enjoyed this again. If you haven't checked out Overwater basses yet, which is one of these little bad boys, make sure you do so. I'll put a link. If you're on YouTube, the link will be in the description. If you're on the website, scottsbassessence.com, the link will be below this video. And remember as well that if you're an Academy member, Chris has a course on how to set up your entire bass, intonation, string heights, how your truss rod works, all those shenanigans in the Academy. And if you're not an Academy member, go check it out. I'll stick a link below the video for that as well. So other than that, take it easy and we'll see you next time in the shed. Bye.